Hello everyone, I'm Ken Reels, and welcome to This Anime, the podcast that talks about anime past, present, and future, all with the exclamation of This Anime. And this is your This Anime for the month of February 2021. And oh boy, there is some talk, basically, that there was a last minute change in what we were doing for our topic for this month, because back in January I announced, we're gonna do Devil's Line and MMO Junkie, Recovery of an MMO Junkie. So I started Devil's Line, and I very quickly realized I don't want to cover this. Because you see, Devil's Line is a series with some more problematic topics than I originally remember back when I first watched it. There's a lot to unpack there, and I don't feel comfortable unpacking it as a male. Like, if I were to again get a female guest on the show, maybe I'd cover something like that. But I don't think I'm the best person by myself to talk about that kind of what happens in that show. Very, very early on. I still have fond memories of Devil's Line, and I think it's a solid show. It's just, ooh boy, I did not remember some of the stuff that happened early on in that series. So things got changed around a little bit, and instead of talking about Devil's Line, we are talking about Aura Koga Maryuin's Last War. Yeah, that's right. Maryuin. So this is very much a it's a film, so we'll cover that in the second half of the episode, because what we're going to be talking about is, of course, MMO Junkie. More importantly, Recovery of an MMO Junkie, which is a series that I very much enjoy, and I think we should just dive right in.
I'm Moriko Morioka, 30 years old. Recent corporate dropout and neat. I'm not your average neat schmuck, though. I chose the neat life. I'm an elite neat. He's perfect. One hot guy character, bam, log in! What the actual hell possessed me to go with a name like Hayashi? I totally overthought it, like I always do.
All right, let's do it. Rest in peace. I'll get you this time. Rest in peace. Okay, this time for sure. Rest in peace.
So, MMO Junkie, when I actually first watched it when it aired back in 2017. This was about let me think. 2017. That was about when I started like watching. It was about like a year or so after I got back into the anime scene, as it were, and there's a lot about this show that I got really attracted to, specifically the idea of, okay, this is a more adult story. It's about adults. I mean, Morioka is early 30s, and Sakurai, he is mid 20s, late 20s, and like this was one of those shows that came out, and I'm like, oh, this is actually about adults, like an anime about adults dealing with adult things in a kind of a rom-com-y fashion, obviously, but that's what struck me considerably, because it was so interesting, because it was just like, oh, this is adults doing adult things, and I really love that. And again, like, people really enjoy this show. This is a very good show. Like, average, it's one of the more higher rated shows of that year. It's more higher rated shows of that season. And it's just a very fun little show. It just is. It is everything that you kind of want from a romantic comedy, with the twist of the fact that these two people are just people that like playing MMOs, and it's a much more modern take on the idea of, like, okay, this is the kinds of people that this is a much more modern take on it, because again, like, I'm one who considers a lot of the friends that I know online to be my actual friends. It's weird, don't get me wrong, but like, I really do consider these people that I know friends, and that idea of, okay, this is just an interesting take on it, and I think that's what makes this show stand out, because it's like, all right, this is a much more modern sensibility. The idea that, okay, we can make friends online with other people and end up actually making connections, and that in turn can allow us to progress our lives outside of the game. Of course, obviously, like, the idea of, oh, you meet someone in the game and then you meet him in real life and you fall in love and blah, blah, blah. Of course, that's fantastical in the greatest of situations, where it's just like you become friends with someone in game, and then you become friends with them in real life, and you just end up connecting, because even though you're putting on airs, you're online, you're still in some ways you, when you're sitting at that computer screen and talking to these people. And that's essentially how I connect with it as just a viewer. Again, like, the day I'm recording this, I literally sat down, marathon the whole freaking series in one sitting. It was interesting, to say the least, to just sit down and marathon the whole thing. Again, like, this is a precursory rewatch just to kind of remind myself some of the elements of it, and of course, I did watch this dubbed, specifically because I have the Blu-ray and everything. I really wanted to try out the dub, and the dub is spectacular, specifically because the director of the ADR director of this is Clifford Chapin, who is the voice of Bakugo on the My Hero Academia dub, and he's probably the best ADR director over at Funimation, because he just gets such good performances out of people, and this is no different, specifically because more specifically, like Terry Dottie, who plays Morioka in this, our main female protagonist, she is absolutely spectacular, and she's absolutely hilarious, and her inner monologue is great. The dialogue is spot on and kind of has that dorkiness to her, and I think that really exudes greatness out of every performance. And when it comes to some of the other characters, like Sakurai, who is Josh Greel, who is also an ADR guy over at Funimation. He's also done some great stuff. He is also the voice of Yuri from Yuri on Ice. He, like our main protag of our main, like, Yuri from Yuri on Ice, our black-haired adorbs boy, and it stands out specifically because it's like, all right, everyone has these different relationships with each other, and you start to get to know all of these MMO characters, because you've got Lily, who is Sakurai's character, and then Morioka's character Hayashi, who is a male, obviously, and Lily is Sakurai, who plays a female character, and that actually kind of speaks to me, because I kind of like playing female characters in games. I just have a good time playing female characters in games over male counterparts, because it's just like I get to do so much and play so much with female characters compared to males. And then you have Kanbei, who is the guild leader. He's just a strong-headed, good head on his shoulders kind of guy. And his counterpart is a convenience store clerk who is in college, working part-time at the convenience store, and a little younger than our leads. And then you have Koiwai. Oh god, Koiwai. Koiwai is easily the greatest wingman. Like, one of the top 10 wingman in anime, easily. Specifically because he is so willing to help. And in the dub, he's played by Ian Sinclair, who is really prominent in anime. He's been prominent in anime for a very long time. And he is also, and if you don't know, he's the voice of Whis in the Dragon Ball dub. So if you don't, you will, if you know Dragon Ball, you're going to immediately notice him in the dub. And he's just so spot on. And of course, like he's always teasing Sakurai. He's always kind of teasing Morioka, just kind of pushing the two of them kind of together. And then at the end, he ends up just saying, "All right, you two, just get together and meet up. Like, seriously, stop it. You're adorable together. You two deserve each other. Go." And I think that is super sweet. And essentially, like, he is 100% the number one wingman when it comes to who he is. And it just really is one of my... this is one of my shows that I watched back when I was, like, really into the seasonal stuff. Like, watching a lot of the seasonal stuff. And I'm like, this speaks to me more as a more adult than any of, like, the high school stuff. And people always talk about, like, oh, why does anime constantly have this high school setting, blah, blah, blah. But when a show like this comes around and it starts talking about actual adults dealing with adult problems, I think that exudes more to what a more modern audience is looking for. Like, I've been looking for stuff that is more adult in its theming. Sometimes necessarily it could be set in high school, it could not be. But when you set these characters in a high school, if you were to set these characters in high school, it wouldn't hit as hard. It wouldn't hit as it wouldn't be as profound. And I mean that it goes to say that the actual manga this is based on got canceled. And I think that kind of says something about the Japanese audience, and that kind of says something about the American audience, because as an American audience, I wholeheartedly feel for these characters, and I really connect with them, just as an older person myself. And it's interesting. It's a very interesting thing to see a topic like this come out and genuinely be entertaining, funny on multiple levels. There's some obviously very Japanese jokes. There's a constant joke of when someone's talking about someone else, it'll do a quick cutaway to that person sneezing, and that's a very Japanese joke. But, like, there's also the level of, like, these characters are so cute together, and Morioka is like genuinely very cute. And the idea that she is also self-deprecating, and that's another thing. Her sense of self-esteem is very, very low. She doesn't actually see herself as a normal person. She, like, doesn't feel connected to these people. And I think that is a point that I want to make, because it's like, as someone who has had low self-esteem and kind of still suffers from it to a certain degree, it definitely speaks to me. And it's like, you always get these people that are that way. Like I will 100% rip myself to shreds all the time, and sometimes it is because I'm having low self-esteem days, and then other times I'm not. But it really, it's super interesting to see that kind of character, and then also to pair that character with someone so caring who also speaks to me. Like I am a very empathetic and caring person. Like I'm constantly talking about it here on this show because I really do feel for some of these characters that I end up talking about, and that's one of the best things about this show is that they are good for each other. They do complement each other, both in the game and outside in the real world. And I think that is a message that needs to be said. Like, you can be the same person you are behind a avatar in real life. It's just your perception of what you're doing in reality. You don't need to necessarily be that different of a human being in real life. You can still be the person you are online and be that exuberant. Like, I'm very exuberant here on this show and also online, and you'd be surprised how meek I am in real life. But I'm always striving to not be that in reality. Like, I don't want to be that meek person. Even though I 100% sometimes am. But like, I've taken so much time to try and exude that out there in reality, and I think this show kind of pushes that idea that we can be the same person we are online. You just gotta be a little more self-confident, and you can still be yourself because you will always be yourself. Both sides of even your online persona and your real life persona, there are elements that will always be you. And I think that is 100% the message of this show. And that speaks to what makes this show so great, what makes it what it is. And honestly, this is what makes anime great in general. Like, you can't not talk about a topic like this and not kind of like say, okay, I can connect with it on this level and disconnect it on this level. You gotta think about the art that you're watching. And I think this is probably, if I were to make like a top 50 anime, this is definitely like top 20, because it just speaks to who I am as a person and kind of who I want to be. And I can't ask for anything more. And with that, that's gonna be it for our talk about MMO Junkie. I know it's a little shorter than normal talks, but honestly, I think you guys should check this out. It's only 10 episodes, 11 if you count the OVA, and I think the OVA is fine. It's not amazing. It's just like a goofy one-off kind of two-pronged episode, because there's like the first half is one short and the second half is another short, and both of them are fine. They're not amazing, but it's a very short series, and it's definitely worth the watch. And so before we get into Aurora, we're gonna take a quick break for a little bit of music. So we'll be right back after this. Welcome back to This Anime, and you just heard the little bit from the MMO Junkie soundtrack, which is really, really good. Like, I really did love the music of that series. Just a couple of bits. Like, there are a couple of tracks that really stand out to me. But with that, we are diving back into this show, and we're going to be talking about Aurora, Koga Maryuin's Last War.
現実虚構と対になった単語。一郎は虚構や空想を切望する。
マリュイン、飛行はここで打ち落とす。
行こう。私と同じものは連れて行ける。もうこの世界は価値がない。行こう。ただそこにある優しさ、愛しくて閉じた願い、
そうなんだよ。
どうしてもっと素直に助けたいって思わせてくれないんだよ。お前は
その僕らの世界、ここから目覚めよう。
なんでだよ。
強量だから。
誰が。
世界が
So what stands out about this movie, when I like picked it up on cheap because it was pretty cheap on Sentai Filmworks website, and it usually is because it's constantly on sale. This is a movie from 2013. It is honestly one of those movies where I'm just like, wait, what the hell is this? And I kind of was in shock at how much it spoke to me as just kind of one of those kinds of people in high school. Like, I was I wasn't out there, and having that very much world in your head kind of idea, and I think that exuded itself in this sense, because this was one of those movies that just kind of was like, huh, why the fuck isn't this been talked about a lot of the time? And I think one of the main reasons why it's not talked about a lot is because it has a awful name. Like, I can't begin to and don't get me wrong, it's the same name as the friggin' light novel it's based on, but wow, it is not necessarily a series that I think exudes it kind of shows itself off as, okay, this is what it's about. It really isn't. It's in fact completely hiding the fact that it is really about living in a fantasy, and how sometimes you need to, the escapism can only go so far. You can't actually live in your fantasy world consistently. You need to stop and live in the real world. And that is kind of hard to talk about, especially given the fact that I sit here and do a podcast and talk to into a microphone every month for like an hour plus. But yeah, it's something that I think needs to be talked about, because it's interesting that these show, like this movie, while I don't think is as exuberant as some of the other pieces that we've covered on this show, I think this is kind of one of those hidden gems that I think will speak to a bunch of people. I'm not necessarily 100% saying I'm one of them, to be perfectly frank. I think there are elements that really speak to me, and there are some great emotional highs, but there are also elements where I'm just like, no, this is quaint. This is a quaint film. And even like the dub, which I think is fine. It's a serviceable dub. And I think there are some standout performances, mainly our two leads. And I really, really enjoyed it. And maybe that's just me. And I don't think it is for everyone. And maybe that's why people don't necessarily talk about it. People don't necessarily point it out. And like the animation is fine. It's serviceable. And it's hard to really pin this show down to just kind of say, this is fine. This is fine. This is enjoyable. And I enjoyed my time. I don't think I will return to this unless like I want to show someone this series or this show, this movie. God damn it! Why the fuck am I talking about shows? I'm so used to talking about shows. This movie is fine. It is short. It's like not even an hour and a half. It's about like an hour and some change, if you don't count the credits. But it was really interesting. And when I was starting it, one of the things that came out of it was the fact that the teacher character, I'm like, oh, I don't like you. But then, like, the movie started to progress and started to evolve, and you go, okay, maybe that makes sense. He had his students' best intentions at heart, because there are a couple of people in his class who all have these delusions, and Ichiru, he used to have these delusions, and his teacher's kind of like going, look, we can try, I want you to kind of help this girl come to the same realizations you did and kind of be able to move on and live in the real world. And I think that's kind of sweet. There's a sweetness to it. And the facade, at the end of the movie, when Isuru realizes the only way to break her out of her facade is to enter his facade one last time. And that is really cool, and it also retextualizes the opening, where we see the character that he imbued and what and then you start piecing together, okay, this in reality, this is what actually happened in that opening. And it caused, and then everything that we hear about happened following that moment. And you go, okay, like you're this movie doesn't necessarily show you or even tell you what actually transpired beat for beat. You slowly have to piece things together. And I think that is an interesting idea, especially given the fact that some of these characters are just like the worst. Like some of the like bullies in this school, like females in high school are just the worst. Like they're really bad. And man, like even as a male in high school, like I could tell most of the girls were kind of bitches. And holy shit, are they brutally like they are very, very brutal in this. And I can't, it's pretty hard to describe, and especially given the fact that there's a lot of trauma for not only Ichiro, but his mother and his sister. His sister just like outright is very frank and goes like, look, I don't want you to be connected to my brother because he was in that hole before, and I don't want to see my mother go down that route again. And I think by the end of this movie, I go, okay, I'm getting where this is going. And it's like the movie lost me at about like the halfway point. I'm starting to not understand what the hell, what direction it was going. And then it started to piece itself together, and you started to like, I started to piece together what the heck was going on. And I go, okay, all right, I know where this is going, and I'm actually happy it's going in this direction. And I think that is essentially what makes this stand out, is the fact that it ends strongly, despite the fact that its beginning is interesting, but its middle is kind of like, I don't know what to really think about it. And I don't know, like I actually really dug how it ends, with the fact that Ryoku, she loses the mask that she was exuding, and you get to see actually her, and you get to piece together, okay, this is these two characters are both troubled, they both had issues, and they hid behind these fantasy characters, but they start piecing, they're on the first step to piecing back their lives together. And I think that's a sweet way to end it. And I think that's a sweet way to kind of exude what makes this what makes it stand out. And you get to see that Ichiro, like, he can make friends. Like, and he shows Ryoku, you can make friends with people and have people care about you as a person, and not push you away as this fantasy character and make fun of you as this human. Like, you don't need to be afraid. And I think that is essentially what it is. It's about learning to grow and learning to accept who you are. And in a way, it connects to MMO Junkie, and it's just like, you are taking the fantasy and taking elements of that to bring into your reality. And that, to me, is kind of a theme for this this month. Despite me going like, oh, we're gonna do some kind of romance theming, in an indirect way, I kind of connected these two shows, and kind of said like, look, this is about personal growth, and taking things you didn't really connect with, things that you can connect from your fantasy and bring that into your reality. And honestly, I didn't even realize it until I started sitting here talking to you guys here on mic, that these two had a very stark connection to each other, in terms of its theming. And that kind of clicks with me a lot. And I think I think I'm going to actually sit down and rewatch Aurora in the near future, because it's just like, yeah, no, this speaks. There's a level of just speaking to that element. And honestly, like, Aura is interesting. I think its name is very shitty and it doesn't really exude what it's about. But in a way it does. It's one of those subtle titles where you're just like, I don't think this works as well as you think it does. And as a result, it just kind of goes, I don't know. And on that weird thematic realization, that is going to be it for this episode of This Anime. Sorry it's a little shorter than it genuinely is. Just kind of, these were shorter pieces and there was a little less to talk about. But next month is not the case, because I've got to sit through a 2-core series and a pretty prolific movie. So for the month of March, I thought, why don't I kind of have a European inspired theme? And no, we're not talking about Full Metal Alchemist. That would be fucking insane. What we are talking about is a series called Ancient Magus Bride, and I'm pairing that with a Miyazaki film. Actually, our first Miyazaki film we have covered on this show, specifically because I don't necessarily like. I don't think Miyazaki is a filmmaker that I want to cover consistently, specifically because a lot of people have seen his stuff. But I do want to I did want to return to it. I did want to go and watch this movie that I'm specifically talking about for next month, which is Howl's Moving Castle, because I actually haven't seen this one. There are a handful of Miyazakis that I haven't seen and some that I have, but Howl's Moving Castle was one of those, everyone talks about it, and especially because I find Spirited Away to be a little overrated, I was always hesitant to actually sit down and watch this. But we're going to be watching it for the show next month. So the month of March, which for those of you who are listening, the month of March, we are going to be talking. That episode is going to go out on literally the 28th of March. Oddly enough, that episode will be the 28th of March. And that will be Howl's Moving Castle and Ancient Magus Bride, are European Celtic kind of inspiration topic, as it were, for March. Oddly enough, Ancient Magus Bride kind of has a Ghibli feel to it, which kind of was a subconscious decision on my part to kind of go like, all right, let's give Ghibli and Miyazaki some love when it came to choosing what to do for March. And what to pair it with, considering Ancient Magus Bride is 25 episodes, so it's a longer series to cover. And that's going to be our topic for then. Also, at the beginning of April is going to be our first episode of the Anime Book Club. So don't forget, Anime Book Club we are about a month and a couple days out from our Anime Book Club, which is going to be the second half of Fibrain Season 2. So don't forget about that. And that, with all that out of the way, you can follow me at Ken Reels on Twitter and on Instagram. Follow the show at ThisAnimePod. ThisAnimePodcast.com is where you can find the show. And yeah, I'm going to get out of here. So see you guys next time. Bye. Thank you for listening to This Anime.
Okay, master. Let's kill the whole.
No. If anything, just like us on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/ThisAnimePodcast. Follow the podcast on Twitter at ThisAnimePod, or comment on our episode posts over at ThisAnimePodcast.com. That's This Anime Podcast on Facebook, at ThisAnimePod on Twitter, and ThisAnimePodcast.com.
Yes. Oh my god.
This Anime is available on Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, and Google Play/podcasts. If you're listening on one of those platforms, please consider subscribing, rating, and or reviewing on those platforms to help us grow. Every time you do so, it helps This Anime take over